U.S. President Joe Biden announced his decision to withdraw from the 2024 presidential race, stating it was in the best interest of his party and the country. On July 21, 2024, Joe Biden, the incumbent Democratic President of the United States, announced his withdrawal from the 2024 United States presidential election and endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris as his replacement. Biden had announced that he would run for re-election in the 2024 presidential election on April 25, 2023, with Harris again as his running mate. Biden won an overwhelming majority of delegates in the 2024 Democratic Party presidential primaries and was already considered the presumptive nominee before the primaries were over. However, public concerns about Biden's age and health had emerged during his presidency, particularly about his fitness for the office and ability to carry out a second term. These concerns spiked after a debate between Biden and Republican Party candidate Donald Trump on June 27, 2024. Biden's performance was widely criticized, with commentators noting he frequently lost his train of thought and gave meandering answers, had a faltering appearance, spoke with a hoarse voice, and failed to recall statistics or coherently express his opinion on several occasions. Biden subsequently faced calls to withdraw from the race from fellow Democrats and from the editorial boards of major news outlets. By July 19, 2024, more than 30 senior Democrats had called for him to withdraw. Biden repeatedly insisted for weeks after the debate that he would remain a candidate, despite numerous calls for him to withdraw. However, on July 21, 2024, he withdrew his candidacy via a signed letter posted on his personal X account, writing that this was in the best interest of my party and the country, while stating that he would continue serving as president until the conclusion of his term. Biden was the first incumbent president since Lyndon B. Johnson in 1968 to withdraw from a re-election race, the first since the 19th century to withdraw after serving only one term, and the only one ever to withdraw after already winning the primaries. Historically, most sitting U.S. presidents who completed one full term chose to run for a second. The following presidents were eligible for re-election after completing at least one full term in office, but chose not to run. James K. Polk, in office 1845 to 1849, kept campaign promise to serve only one term. James Buchanan, in office 1857 to 1861, kept campaign promise to serve only one term. Rutherford B. Hayes, in office 1877 to 1881, kept campaign promise to serve only one term. Calvin Coolidge, in office 1923 to 1929, chose not to run after serving one partial term and one full term. Harry S. Truman, in office 1945 to 1953, withdrew from the race after serving one partial term and one full term. Lyndon B. Johnson, in office 1963 to 1969, withdrew from the race after serving one partial term and one full term. Passed by Congress in 1947 and ratified by the states in 1951, the 22nd Amendment to the U.S. Constitution imposes a limit of 2 full terms on presidents. Prior to the term limit, many, though not all, presidents followed an informal 2-term tradition after a precedent set by George Washington, who chose not to run for re-election after serving 2 terms. Biden as a bridge candidate. During the 2020 presidential election, Biden pitched himself as a bridge candidate to a new generation of leadership. However, Biden denied Politico's claims that he was considering a one-term pledge. As Biden's campaign faltered in 2024, Axios quoted scholar Anthony Fowler as saying, "You could argue he's trying to kind of have it both ways. He's trying to kind of tell people, don't worry, I'm only running for one term, without ever actually explicitly promising that." On April 25, 2023, after months of speculation, Biden confirmed he would run for re-election as president in the 2024 presidential election, with Vice President Kamala Harris again as his running mate. The campaign launched 4 years to the day after the start of his 2020 presidential campaign. On the day of his announcement, a Gallup poll found that Biden's approval rating was 37%, with most of those surveyed saying the economy was their biggest concern. During his campaign, Biden promoted higher economic growth and recovery following the COVID-19 pandemic. He frequently stated his intention to finish the job as a political rallying cry. Biden made protecting American democracy a central focus of his campaign, along with restoring the federal right to abortion following the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade. He also intended to increase funding for Border Patrol and security and increase funding for law enforcement coupled with police reform. Biden promised to support, protect, and expand LGBT rights, and frequently touted his previous passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act, a landmark investment to combat climate change. Biden made strengthening U.S. alliances a key goal of his foreign policy and promised to continue supporting Ukraine following the Russian invasion of the country and Israel following their war with Hamas, describing them as vital to U.S. national security interests. Biden promised to continue efforts to tackle gun violence and defend the Affordable Care Act following comments from Donald Trump suggesting he would repeal the law. Biden proposed increasing taxes on the wealthy through a billionaire minimum income tax to reduce the deficit and fund social services for the poor. Biden's trade policy was described as rejecting traditional neoliberal economic policy and the Washington consensus that resulted in the offshoring of manufacturing and thus resulted in increased populist backlash. Biden proposed and enacted targeted tariffs against strategic Chinese industries to protect manufacturing jobs and counter China's technological and military ambitions. Biden was not on the ballot in the January 23 New Hampshire primary, but he won it in a write-in campaign with 63.8% of the vote. He had wanted South Carolina to be the first primary, and won that state on February 3 with 96.2% of the vote. Biden received 89.3% of the vote in Nevada and 81.1% of the vote in Michigan, with none of these candidates and uncommitted coming in second in each state, respectively. On March 5, Super Tuesday, he won 15 of 16 primaries, netting 80% or more of the vote in 13 of them. On March 12, he reached more than the 1,968 delegates needed to win the Democratic nomination, becoming the presumptive nominee. Biden was 78 years old at his inauguration, making him the oldest individual to assume the presidency. 41 Biden was also older when he assumed the office than Ronald Reagan, the previous oldest, had been when leaving it. Health concerns surrounding Biden emerged during his presidency, primarily about his age and ability to carry out a second term. In a report in the Journal on Active Aging, doctors noted he had an exceptional health profile relative to his age, and a medical assessment performed by physician Kevin O'Connor attested to his physical acuity. The Washington Post's Dan Zak described the U.S. government as a gerontocracy with Biden's inauguration. In July 2024, the New York Times reported that Kevin Cannard, a neurologist from Walter Reed National Military Medical Center specializing in movement disorders such as Parkinson's disease, visited the White House 8 times within the last 8 months, including a meeting with Biden's physician. 45 The report generated controversy as O'Connor challenged it, citing Cannard's appearances during Barack Obama's administration and personnel within the White House who suffer from neurological disorders. Biden and Trump faced each other in a televised debate on June 27, 2024. Trump was declared the winner of the debate by columnists from The Hill, CNN, Politico, The New York Times, USA Today, Business Insider, and Vox. Columnists from MSNBC, The Cook Political Report, The Guardian, and the Los Angeles Times argued that while Trump did not win the debate, Biden clearly lost. Many Democrats in particular criticized Biden's performance, in which he had a faltering appearance and spoke with a hoarse voice, and failed to recall statistics or coherently express his opinion on several occasions. Several newspaper columnists declared Trump the winner, and polling indicated the majority of the public believed Trump won. Following Biden's performance at the debate, many Democrats called for him to withdraw from the race, leading to political turmoil within the party that the media referred to as the Biden crisis. On July 17, ABC News reported that House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer had met with Biden on July 12 and 13, respectively, and had expressed concerns to Biden about Democratic losses in Congress. Biden reportedly told Schumer that he needed another week to make a decision. Jeffrey Katzenberg, a campaign co-chairman, reportedly warned Biden on July 17 that donors were stopping funding his campaign, although Katzenberg disputed that characterization of their discussion. That evening, Biden tested positive for COVID-19. He experienced mild symptoms, including a cough, runny nose, and general malaise. However, images of him looking frail exiting from Air Force One on the way to isolation at his residence in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, fueled further speculation over his health. The New York Times reported that Biden was more receptive to withdrawing his nomination. In phone conversations, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi told Biden she was pessimistic about his candidacy. On July 18, Axios reported that Democrats believed Biden would exit the election, citing pressure from Jeffries and Schumer, internal polling, and criticism. The New York Times reported that day that Biden was considering that he may have to withdraw. CNN reported that on July 20, Biden met with advisors Steve Ricchetti and Mike Donilon, during which they concluded that worsening poll numbers and a loss of party support had left the campaign without a plausible strategy to recover. That evening, Biden began planning a possible exit from the race with Ricchetti, Donilon, and other close aides, and he fully committed to the decision on the morning of July 21. Prior to Biden's withdrawal, the word Joe-over, a portmanteau of Joe and over, was used by critics and media to describe the state of Biden's campaign. Though the word was first coined in a meme on 4chan/poll/imageboard in 2020, the word's usage in social media posts and major media stories spiked significantly following the debate. The Biden campaign initially attempted to push past the criticism and continue on to the nomination. The Biden campaign attempted to reduce the tenacity of comments seeking Biden's withdrawal until he could be formally nominated in a virtual roll call vote prior to the Democratic National Convention, which was described as in effect running out the clock. In response to criticisms following the debate, Biden announced several progressive policies, including Supreme Court reform to impose term limits and a binding code of ethics, a constitutional amendment to institute prosecutorial authority for presidential actions, a national assault weapons ban, and limiting rent increases. However, when announcing his plan to a meeting of the NAACP, he misread his teleprompter and erroneously claimed the cap would be at $55, not 5%. Biden addressing his withdrawal, July 24, 2024. On July 21, Biden's official X account posted a letter announcing his withdrawal. In the letter, he wrote, "And while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." Later the same day, a post from the same account endorsed Harris, the vice president since 2021, as his replacement in the presidential race. On July 24, 2024, in his first appearance since withdrawing from the presidential race, President Biden explained his decision. Speaking from the Oval Office, he stated that his reason was the defense of democracy. Addressing the presidential campaigns, he remarked, "America's going to have to choose between moving forward or backward, between hope and hate, between unity and division." Biden's pledged delegates were released by his resignation from the race. A candidate who receives 300 signatures from delegates will appear on the convention ballot. A candidate must receive a majority of delegate votes at the convention to become the nominee. If no candidate initially receives a majority of votes, an additional 700 superdelegates are permitted to vote on a candidate. Biden's endorsement of Harris notwithstanding, Democratic National Committee rules do not require these delegates to follow his recommendation and support his selected successor. In a survey of delegates by the Associated Press on July 22, 2024, Harris became the presumptive nominee after receiving pledges from more than half of the delegates. On August 5, Harris was officially nominated, and was certified as the Democratic presidential nominee that night. Former Presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama praised Biden's work as president, with Obama writing that Joe Biden has been one of America's most consequential presidents and that Biden wouldn't make this decision unless he believed it was right for America. Many Democrats praised Biden's decision as selfless, such as South Carolina Congressman Jim Clyburn, Obama advisor David Axelrod, and Ohio Congressman Greg Landsman, with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer writing that Biden once again put his country, his party, and our future first over himself. Former Secretary of State and presidential candidate Hillary Clinton did the same and endorsed Harris. Anti-Biden sign in Willow River, Minnesota, modified to be anti-Harris instead. Following the announcement of Biden's withdrawal, Trump released a statement on his social media platform, Truth Social, arguing that his former opponent was not fit to run for president, and is certainly not fit to serve, calling him the worst president, by far, in the history of our nation. Trump's re-election campaign has prepared opposition research dossiers on Kamala Harris and Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. The campaign intended to release messaging critical of Harris at the Republican National Convention, but ultimately decided against it. Trump complained about Biden's withdrawal in a July 21 Truth Social post and requested that the Republican Party should be reimbursed for the money they spent campaigning against Biden. Trump also compared the Democratic Party's support of replacing Biden to a coup. Trump's language of coup was widely imitated by other Republican politicians and strategists, and in an op-ed by Josh Hammer, a senior editor of Newsweek. Joe Biden, the 46th and incumbent President of the United States, announced his candidacy for re-election for a second presidential term on April 25, 2023, with Vice President Kamala Harris as his running mate. He suspended the campaign on July 21, 2024. Biden made protecting American democracy a central focus of his campaign, along with restoring the federal right to abortion following the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade. He also intended to increase funding for Border Patrol and security, and increase funding for law enforcement coupled with police reform. Biden promised to support, protect, and expand LGBT rights and frequently touted his previous passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act's landmark investment to combat climate change. Biden made strengthening U.S. alliances a key goal of his foreign policy and promised to continue supporting Ukraine following the Russian invasion of the country and Israel following their war with Hamas, describing them as vital to U.S. national security interests. Biden promised to continue efforts to tackle gun violence and defend the Affordable Care Act following comments from Donald Trump suggesting he would repeal the law. Biden proposed increasing taxes on the wealthy through a billionaire minimum income tax to reduce the deficit and fund social services for the poor. Biden's trade policy was described as rejecting traditional neoliberal economic policy and the Washington Consensus that resulted in the offshoring of manufacturing and thus resulted in increased populist backlash. Biden proposed and enacted targeted tariffs against strategic Chinese industries to protect manufacturing jobs and counter China's technological and military ambitions. On March 12, 2024, Biden became the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party after clinching enough delegates in Georgia, and did not face any significant primary challengers. The first presidential debate was held on June 27, 2024, between Biden and Trump. Biden's performance was widely criticized, with commentators saying that he frequently lost his train of thought and gave meandering answers. Several newspaper columnists declared Trump winner of the debate, which was supported by polling results. After the debate, concerns about his health intensified, and Biden faced many calls to withdraw from the race, including from fellow Democrats and the editorial boards of several major news outlets. Biden initially insisted that he would remain a candidate amid the calls to drop out. However, on July 21, 2024, Biden ended his re-election campaign and endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris as his successor. Harris launched her own campaign later that day. As of July 22, 2024, Harris had secured enough delegates to become the presumptive Democratic nominee. This was Biden's fourth presidential campaign, and was his first as the incumbent. His first campaign was in the 1988 Democratic Party presidential primaries. While he was initially considered one of the strongest candidates in that race, a scandal broke soon thereafter when news reports uncovered plagiarism by Biden in law school records and in speeches. This revelation led to his withdrawal from the race in September 1987. He made a second attempt during the 2008 Democratic Party presidential primaries. Like his first presidential bid, Biden failed to garner a sufficient level of endorsements and support. He withdrew from the race after his poor performance in the Iowa caucus on January 3, 2008. He was eventually chosen to be the running mate of the party's nominee Barack Obama. Following the Obama/Biden ticket's victory in the general election, Biden was sworn in as Vice President of the United States on January 20, 2009. He ran again as Obama's running mate in 2012 and was re-elected Vice President, being sworn in for second term on January 20, 2013, and serving until January 20, 2017. Biden's third presidential bid came during the 2020 Democratic Party presidential primaries, where he focused his plans as the candidate with the best chance of defeating then-President Donald Trump in the general election. Politico reported in 2018 that Biden had rejected a proposition to commit to serving only one term as president. In May 2021, Biden's chief of staff Ron Klain indicated the Biden administration was anticipating a bruising general election matchup against Donald Trump, who had served as the 45th president of the United States and had been defeated by Biden in the 2020 presidential election, if the latter followed through on a bid to return to the presidency. In November 2021, against a backdrop of declining approval ratings, the Biden White House reiterated Biden's intent to run for re-election. In a March 2022 press conference, when asked about the possibility that Trump could be his opponent in 2024, Biden replied, "I'd be very fortunate if I had that same man running against me." In a PBS NewsHour/NPR/Marist poll released on April 25, 2023, the day Biden announced his re-election campaign, his approval rating was just 41%, with a disapproval rating of 50%. Several polls both before and after Biden's campaign announcement have shown that most Democrats want the party to nominate someone other than Biden for president in the 2024 election. Thank you for watching this video.